Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We have a proposed date for Donald Trump's trial on charges that he tried to steal the 2020 election. In a court filing today, special counsel Jack Smith asked for a start date of January 2nd, 2024, which he said would vindicate the public's interest in a speedy trial. The date will ultimately be decided by the judge presiding in that case, Judge Tanya Chutkin. But even assuming she chooses a somewhat later start, that there may be some delays along the way, Donald Trump is probably going to face trial in this case before the presidential election next November. Though he does have one critical possible Hail Mary remaining. He and his lawyers could try to somehow find a way to kick the case up to the Supreme Court, where the conservative majority would rescue him. That was one of the last desperate plans for Donald Trump's coup back in 2021 to get the Supreme Court to rule in his favor. And we know there's at least one very conservative justice who one of Trump's coup plotters thought would be particularly inclined to help out. I speak of this man, Clarence Thomas. Now, Justice Thomas is probably the most right-wing member of the Supreme Court in living memory. He's fully committed to remaking the country and its jurisprudence in his conservative vision. The other thing you need to know about Clarence Thomas, and there's a lot about him, is that he's always wanted to be rich. It's part of what drove him from a childhood in abject poverty to an Ivy League law school, as a recent PBS Frontline documentary explained.
After Holy Cross, Clarence Thomas was off to a very different world once again, Yale Law School. It was a chance to leave Pinpoint far behind, defy his grandfather's prophecy, and get positioned to make real money.
He had thought, well, you know what, I just go make me a bunch of money, maybe go to New York and be a lawyer.
For a time, Thomas did work in the private sector for the agrochemical giant Monsanto, but by 1981, he was nominated for position in the Reagan administration, and then President George H.W. Bush elevated Thomas to a federal judgeship, and in 1991, nominated him to the Supreme Court. When Clarence Thomas chose to take that path, he was foregoing a lot, and I mean a lot of potential income that he could have made outside of government in some fancy firm. I mean, Supreme Court justices are paid well, but nowhere near as much as a top-flight corporate lawyer. In fact, Thomas himself said in a 2001 speech to the Savannah Bar Association that it is not a job that you do for money.
The job is not worth doing for what they pay. It's not worth doing for the grief, but it is worth doing for the principle.
The other thing is, being a Supreme Court justice is also not a job that you leave. Thomas has been on the court for more than 30 years now, and he's been making a very good upper middle class salary. I mean, certainly enough to live comfortably, take nice vacations, all that stuff, but not enough to be really rich. I mean, you do not get to be a flamboyantly rich guy if you're a Supreme Court justice, not from what they're paying you. But there are a lot of flamboyantly rich guys who do have a real interest in keeping Clarence Thomas on the court. People who share his vision, his right-wing ideology, who want him to rule in line with that vision. And so some of these people seem to have created a way of letting Thomas kind of have his cake and eat it too. Thomas stays put on the court in his supremely important, though, public sector job, and his wealthy right-wing supporters pay for him to live like a rich guy. In fact, new reporting from ProPublica today reveals that Thomas has received gifts, quote, underwritten by benefactors who share the ideology that drives his jurisprudence, including, and here we start to get to the numbers, at least 38 destination vacations, including a previously unreported voyage on a yacht around the Bahamas, 26 private jet flights, plus an additional 8 by helicopter. A dozen VIP passes to professional and college sporting events typically perched in the skybox, 2 stays at a luxury resorts in Florida and Jamaica, and 1 standing invitation to an Uber-exclusive golf club overlooking the Atlantic coast. Now, to be clear, just so we get the numbers straight, that comes on top of previous investigations revealing details about the billionaire Republican donor who purchased property from Thomas, including his mother's home where she now lives rent-free, and paid for the private school tuition of his grandnephew, who Thomas raised as a son, none of which Thomas has ever disclosed. So when you take a step back, this is what appears to be the deal if you will, between Clarence Thomas and his right-wing benefactors. You want yachts? We got yachts. You want private jets? We got private jets. You want a fancy elite education for your adopted son? We've got it. We will give you the life of luxury you want if you stay on the court where we need you, pursuing the ideological project we are all committed to. This is why gifts, particularly to judges, I mean to any public official, right, but to judges, are supposed to be at the very least disclosed and hopefully regulated or banned. It can be shockingly corrupt for a judge to be dependent on wealthy benefactors giving him lots of stuff. But this deal has meant that Clarence Thomas is essentially a kept man. One of the most powerful men in the country who sits on the highest court in the land, lifetime tenure, there's essentially no way to dislodge him. And apart from the dangers of this as it relates to his day-to-day job, and they're significant, ruling on the most important cases in the country that come to the Supreme Court, it has also set up real implications as it relates to what Donald Trump was trying to do on January 6th. So we already know, right, that Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny, was corresponding with Mark Meadows about the election, and also corresponding with one of Trump's lawyers, John Eastman, that man there, after the election. Now, Eastman is kind of in the Thomas circle. He was the author of the original coup memo, and he's also a former Thomas clerk. On December 4th, 2020, Ginny asked Eastman if he would present a status update to a group of grassroots state leaders, presumably an update on Eastman and other possible unindicted co-conspirators' efforts to help Donald Trump steal the election. We also know that John Eastman spoke about his theory to overturn the 2020 results with a lawyer for Vice President Mike Pence, Greg Jacob. And in that conversation, John Eastman talked about how he thought it would play out if a dispute over the election made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. This comes from Jacob's testimony to the January 6th committee last year.
Mr. Jacob, you discussed and even debated this theory at length with Dr. Eastman. Did Dr. Eastman ever tell you what he thought the U.S. Supreme Court would do if it had to decide this issue?
Yes. We had an extended discussion, an hour and a half to 2 hours on January 5th. And when I pressed him on the point, I said, John, if the vice president did what you were asking him to do, we would lose 9-0 in the Supreme Court, wouldn't we? And he initially started it, well, I think maybe you would lose only 7-2. And after some further discussion, acknowledged, well, yeah, you're right, we would lose 9-0.
9-0 or 7-2. Now, I think I could come up with who those two might be. Who are two justices who would be willing to transgress the law so thoroughly that they would endorse a coup? They were really counting on Clarence Thomas, the kept man. Clearly, he would be one of the two to vote in their favor. And he could even be counted on to unilaterally rule for them in an emergency appeal as the what's called circuit justice for Georgia. So this is another email from the coup plotters. This was written by another Trump lawyer named Kenneth Chesebro, who wrote another coup memo recently revealed by the New York Times. We've covered it here. So Chesebro writes to Eastman, quote, possibly, as they're spelling out how they're going to steal the election, possibly Thomas would end up being the key here. We want to frame things so that Thomas could be the one to issue some sort of stay or other circuit justice opinion saying Georgia is in legitimate doubt. Realistically, our only chance to get a favorable judicial opinion by January 6th, which might hold up the Georgia count in Congress, is from Thomas. Now, of course, it didn't play out the way they had planned. It never got up to the court. The system held. The will of voters were heard. And I want to be fair here. I think the theory was so cockamamie that even if it had gone to the Supreme Court, I would hope that Greg Jacob was right and it would have died a 9-0 death. I'd hope. In the end, the coup did not work. Joe Biden became president. But what happens if some aspect of Donald Trump's election case ends up in front of this Supreme Court? What if they have an opportunity not to do anything affirmative, but just to delay, just to kick the can, maybe even silently, so that he's spared a trial before the election? Will Clarence Thomas, the kept man, whose life of luxury is subsidized by right-wing benefactors, deliver for the right?